Today we're going to do a little bit of distressing work. We're going to do it with wax and with petroleum jelly, just so you can see the difference of it. Started with this piece. I'm going to paint it like another piece that I already have. Since I found this one at a garage sale and I really like it as much as my other one. It did have a huge crack up the middle, and I do like to use Bondo to fill in that crack, because if you can tell, once you sand the Bondo, it stays right in the lines, and I just think it sands easier than wood filler. So for this, I'm going to do wax on this side and Vaseline on this side, just so that when I scrape it off, you can tell the difference that it makes. So with the wax, you just want to get, this is just paraffin wax. You can also use a candle. I don't know, might be smelly, but you just want to take a few places where it might get distressed, and you want to rub some of the wax on there until it gets on there, and this is just creating a resist. The cool thing about the petroleum jelly is it leaves a big distress spot, kind of like a smear, like if the paint just came off all in one big chunk. I just take a paintbrush and I leave it with my petroleum jelly, so I don't have to gunk up a bunch of different brushes. And I do the same thing. I just kind of start on the places where I want to do it. Distressing is fun because it'll cover a multitude of issues that you might have done to your piece. But if you do it, you want to make sure that you're going all the way. Just a little bit of distressing doesn't really look good. It looks like maybe you messed up on the piece. My kids are always asking me why I paint something to look like new and then make it look old again. But I like it. It's just a style. So we want to paint right over it. And you'll start noticing, like especially with the petroleum jelly, when you paint over it, you see how the paint doesn't really take to it. It just kind of slides over the top. It forms that resist so that the paint doesn't dry on top of it. If you want to have another piece underneath it, another color underneath it, like if you want it to be white underneath, or if you don't really like the color of your wood and you want like a darker brown underneath, you want to paint that first and then add your candle wax or your Vaseline, whichever one you decide works best for you. You'll notice all the spots that it's not really taking the paint. Once I'm done with this layer of paint, I'm going to do another layer of paint just because I want it to look like whoever originally painted this piece, even though that's me. But let's pretend it was painted a long time ago, and then weather and small children and age came after it and distressed it. You want to look like that person did a good job. They actually gave it a full paint job. And then time and weather and whatever came after it. So I'll always do the one coat and then I'll do another one. And you'll see that second coat too. It won't stick. You'll see kind of lighter colors coming through. Alright, we're going to skip this, let this dry. And we're going to add a little bit more dimension on this side, and then we'll scrape it off. Forgot to say that that first coat was called Ocean Blue, and with teal colors I often find that I always wanted a little bit more blue or a little bit more green, and so what I've started doing is to dry brush another color on top of it just to give it a little bit more dimension and to give it more of the wood look, because now I've covered the wood grain. So I'm going to take an Island Blue, this is called, and I'm going to do my dry brushing. Get your paintbrush, get a lot of the paint off, get some more paint off, and then just drag it. And you'll see it gives the drag lines kind of mirror the wood grain again. You'll see we moved the cabinet and I touched it and took some of the distress work off. We always want to go the direction our grain would go. Otherwise we're going to look like we have a funny built piece of furniture. But this just gives it a little bit more depth. And if you forget to wipe off your paint at one point and you get a little bit too much on there, just use a sanding brush and that'll kind of blend it in. Alright, so once I have that on, now I'm going to show you a few different ways that you can take the paint off. You'll remember this side is going to be the wax and this side is going to be the petroleum jelly. So one way is to use a scraper or a razor. So you're at the dollar store, they're either 2 or 3 for $1, and you can just scrape it off, or on this side. You'll see the wax is going to give you little dotted, and the petroleum jelly is going to give you large chunks. Another way you can do it that's a lot of fun is to get just a little scrubby brush like you do your dishes with. And pretend like you're sanding it. That usually takes off some fun stuff. Another thing you can do is just to get a sanding block and use the sanding block. Either way, if you're using the chalky type finish, sanding works really well. I really like the scraper and the scrubby. The last thing that we want to do with this piece is I want to glaze it to make it look just a little bit more old, not so brand new. You'll see this is what we have already with our distressing and our dry brushing, and over here you can see where I've done some glazing already. The glaze medium that I add to my paint, you can either buy glaze already made or you can add a glaze medium to your paint. All it does is it makes it stay liquid longer, it doesn't dry, extends the drying time so that you can move it around. And to move it around you're going to need water, so I just have a rag that I get a little damp. I mix up my glaze with the color that I want, and then I'm going to brush it on. Depending on how wet your glaze is, how dark it's going to be. Always try to smear towards the outside edge because the outside is the side that's going to get the most dirty. Also, corners are going to be what gets the most dirty. You'll notice anything that I wipe off with the rag, a lot of it comes off. If you want more off, you just get your rag wetter and you keep going against that spot. Sometimes if you have enough glaze on there, you can just move it around with the wet towel. You don't have to keep painting. You want to make sure with glazing it's really fun to pick up details, so you really want to make sure you get it in your corners, your recesses, because it'll stay in there and kind of bring it out a little bit more. When you're doing this, you want to make sure that once your rag is loaded with paint, you use a different part of the rag so that it'll keep taking the glaze off. And the last thing that you're going to want to do to your piece is to add a polyacrylic to it. Things that I've learned about the polyacrylic is that the first coat is always going to look bad. Just like your first coat of painting, it's just going to look spotty. So don't judge it by the first coat. You don't want to go over a spot a lot of times, because that'll actually take you'll be putting the polyacrylic on and then taking it back off. And then you want to do just a couple of coats. And this, as much as or as little as you want to leave on there. Oh, it just adds a little bit more attention to it, a little bit more detail. And then if you find spots that are too bright for your taste, you can always go back with your dry brush and dry brush over the top of it. And that'll lighten it. Just the overall look of it, I'll lighten it back up. And that's it. And I'll try and get a video of it once it's all sealed and done so that you can see the finished piece.
Sneaky. I'm a sneaky cat. Rawr, rawr, rawr.